Say lesson for sharing the lesson. We started to finish. So typically it's directly for each. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start a small and we begin with the lesson. I'll ask you to repeat after me. Say, Adonai Natal, Adonai Lakach, Yishem, Adonai Nevoah. These people tonight are the truth. They say that the Lord is Good morning. My name is Chaim Galfan, and I'll be officiating today. I'll ask that you make sure that your devices are silent, that we don't interrupt our service. I had occasion to meet Josephine Fisher for the first time when she was my age. It goes back about 40 years. And 5 years ago, I was blessed with a phone call in which, after we spoke for a bit, she asked if I would be able to officiate when the time came. And I told her I hoped it would be a while, and I'm grateful that it was 5 years, 5 more years of sharing with all of you. With the passing of Josephine "Jo" Fisher, we look for the strength and support that comes from a connection to an eternal God. And yet our help also comes from the support of family and friends, from precious memories that have been created, memories which all of you here carry within. And no matter how many the number of years, no matter how full the life, there is a source of sorrow in everything. And today you share in that, as Jo Fisher has been taken from both family and community. I offer condolences to her children, Robert and Andy and Fred, and to the children she welcomed through marriage, to Marilyn and to Karen, to her sister and best friend, Marley, to her grandchildren, to Maze and Henry, Britta, Ty, Augusta, and Evan, to her great-grandsons, Willem and Mads, and finally to all of her nieces, nephews, cousins, friends. Some have been able to join us today, some perhaps watching the link Today is a day of sadness and of loss, but it's also a time when we get to plumb the depths of both heart and of memory. Together we'll lean on our tradition, on one another, as we work through this sad time, as we begin to embrace through the Jewish faith the invitation to begin healing. We began with what was done in front of you, but which is a private ceremony, that called Kriya, literally tearing or ripping. And some might ask, why do we tear cloth? And I mentioned that there is perhaps the biblical image of those who have heard of tragic loss and responded instantly with the tearing of the garment. But it's odd because this is a Jewish tradition in which destruction of things wantonly is not advocated. Some say maybe it's an expression of anger at the death, at God, at unfairness. Maybe it's to give an outward expression to something that is tearing on the inside. There's another interesting parallel, which to be honest, never occurred to me until I was thinking about this today, which is that the only other time that we tear the fabric of our clothing is when we learn that the scroll of the sacred Torah has been burned. And you might say that to balance that with a life, it sounds so strange. And yet, perhaps it's that a person is like a Torah scroll, which when a Torah scroll has reached its end, it too is buried in holy ground. And maybe a person is very much like a Torah scroll, something to be studied, a life, something to be learned from, a life. And maybe the final idea that each of us is perhaps like a letter in the sacred scroll. And when one letter is missing, it is as if something has been torn away. But maybe through memory, we are mended. Our common destiny binds us together, perhaps like the pages of the parchments of the Torah scroll stitched together. In the words of Kohelet, Ecclesiastes, a season is set for everything, a time for every experience under heaven, a time for dancing and a time for wailing, a time for birthing and a time for dying, a time for speaking and a time for silence, a time for seeking and a time for losing. The time of mourning is a complicated time. It's filled with so many emotions and memories, together many of them bittersweet. We continue our service with the recitation of psalms and prayers, linking Josephine Fisher's life with a 3,000-year-old tradition of the people of Israel. Shir l'malo, Esa einai el harim, me'ayin yavo Ezri, Ezri me'im Adonai, Ose shamayim va'aretz, al yiten lamot raglecha, al yanum shomrecha, Hine lo yanum lo yishan shomer Yisrael. Adonai shomrecha, Adonai tzilcha, al yad yeminecha. Yomam hashemesh lo yakeka, v'yareach balayla. Adonai yishmorcha mikol ra, yishmor et nafshecha. Adonai yishmor tzedka uvoecha, me'ata ve'ad olam. I'm going to invite Andy and Fred forward first. Your reading by Andy, followed by one.
Psalm 23, Psalm of David. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He makes me lie down in green pastures. He leads me beside still waters. He restores my soul. He leads me in the path of righteousness for his name's sake. Even though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will do no evil, for you are with me. Your rod and your staff, they comfort me. You prepare a table before me in the presence of my enemies. You anoint my head with oil, my cup runs over. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I will dwell in the house of the Lord forever.
Psalm 121, Song of Ascents. I lift up my eyes to the hills, from where will my help come? My help comes from the Lord who made heaven and earth. He will not let your foot be moved. He who keeps you will not slumber. He who keeps Israel will neither slumber nor sleep. The Lord is your keeper. The Lord is your shade at your right hand. The sun shall not strike you by day, nor the moon by night. The Lord will keep you from all evil. He will keep your life. The Lord will keep your going out and your coming in from this time on and forevermore.
Mizmor David, Adonai rogi lo esar, Binot Sheyar Bitsemi, Al me menukot yenaleni, Nafshi yeshover, Nafshi yeshover, Yancheni b'mavet tzedek, Leman shemo, Gam ki elech b'getz al mavet, Lo yirara, ki ata imadi, Shivtecha umishantecha, Shivtecha umishantecha, Ema yenachamuni, Taroch lefanai shulchan, Taroch lefanai shulchan, Taroch lefanai shulchan, neged zorerai, Ishanta v'shemen roshi, Ishanta v'shemen roshi, Ishanta v'shemen roshi, kosire vaya. Achtov v'chesed, yirdefuni, kol yemei chayai, v'shavti b'beit Adonai, v'shavti b'beit Adonai, v'yoret yami.
The Talmudic sage, Rabbi Levi, tells a story of two ships that are laden with merchandise. And one is coming into the port and the other one is going out. And as was the custom, the people standing on the dock would cheer only the ship that was coming into port, but never the one going out, and a puzzled spectator asked why. Why do the people cheer the ship at the end of its journey, but not the one that is just setting sail? And a wise one replied, we're cheering the ship that returns to the dock because we know that it went out in peace and it has returned to port in peace. However, the ship that just leaves, it goes out on a voyage, and who can tell what that ship's fate may be? Rabbi Levi teaches, so it is with a person. When they are born and begin their life's journey, we do not know what sort of life they will live, what their accomplishments might be, whom they might love, and where they might find joy and meaning. However, when a person returns to port, having finished life's journey, they do so with accomplishments which are clear to all. Though death has come to Josephine Fisher, like those on the dock, we cheer and celebrate a life. Jo saw her life as full of possibility. She was intrepid and resilient, never afraid to face the waves, figuratively and literally. She was brave and determined. I'd like to share a reflection written by Marilyn. Jo was a second mother to me and took care of me as much as she could. On the many weekends that we spent together at her home, we always planned fun activities. We talked for hours about everything and nothing. She was loving and kind to me and to others. And when it was time to take care of her, she frequently expressed her gratitude and her love. She spent many weekends with us in Alexandria. She was game for any activity and seemed to love them all. She relaxed. She let us take care of her, which gave her a sense of peace. In her mid-80s, when she had trouble with balance and with walking, she was determined to participate in a game of croquet. She only quit when she got over it. She was a very determined, stubborn person, and she threw herself fully into whatever she did. She was thoughtful, well-read, and progressive in her thinking. We took her to see many plays and concerts, and wondered if the vagina monologues was too much. Surprisingly, she loved it. She had a lifelong interest in learning, read voraciously, and participated in numerous elder hostels. She had a keen sense of adventure. In her 80s, she was excited about a trip to New Mexico with me. Since Passover was coming up, she made and froze her matzo balls and took off. Excited about going to Sandia Peak in Albuquerque, she attempted to navigate to get to the peak. After getting lost, we approached the backside of the mountain, which still had snow and ice, always being game. We headed up the mountain and got stuck on the ice. She hopped out of the car and gave directions on how we should go forward. Of course, we made it. She advocated for others in her retirement home. Staff reported that she addressed anyone who was treating a resident poorly in order to change their behavior. In her 90s, she was on the residence food committee and volunteered at the library and gift shop. As I've said, Jo was a second mother to me. And in the last few years, she would start to introduce me as her daughter-in-law and stop saying, she's really my daughter. In addition to that, when my mom died a year and a half ago, I told her she couldn't die for at least a year. She replied, I'll do my best. Memories come from all different places. I'd like to share some words written by Augusta, drawn from remembering with both Ty and Britta. Grandma Jo, as we've always known her, was not afraid or hesitant to share her opinions, whether it was to send a plate back to the kitchen or to let the waiter know that something was fantastic. She could quietly command attention. She was artistic with a strong and clear eye and appreciation for art, personal style, even in her very old age. I'd say a quote she had framed, "When I grow old, I'll wear purple and learn how to spit," was a perfect example of her wry humor, and her embodiment of it, figuratively, is an example of her intentionality. She was intentional. In both thought for others, as kids, she never missed thinking of us on a holiday, birthday, or in celebration of even a small achievement. In her articulation, and also with her possessions, which seemed to be a curated collection of things that were representative of her personality and interests. She valued kindness and generosity, as is also evident in her embracing Ty, Mays, and me as an extension of her family and thinking of us and our interests. Over the years, she made many gifts of her art, starting with one that was very memorable to me, a porcelain tea set she had hand-painted. Grandma Jo also valued lifelong learning and education. She was impressively up to date with world events and completed the New York Times crossword every week without fail. She even continued to take classes to explore new hobbies throughout her old age. She embodied these values as a founding member of the Women's Museum, Jewish organizations, and other charities. Recently, staff at the Quadrangle said that she enriched their lives, verbalizing and showing people how to face in person. She would want the next generation to be kind and generous and to value learning. Psalm 126 has a unique place as the introduction to the grace after meals at the Jewish Sabbath table. In it, the psalmist describes the hope of those who were returning from captivity in faraway Babylon. Hazorim b'dima, berina yiktsoru. Those who sow in tears shall reap with songs of joy. Halof yelech uvacho, nose meshech hazar. One who goes along weeping, carrying the seed bag, shall come back with songs of joy, carrying their sheaves. The psalmist is able to place both anxiety and also a sense of exaltation in the language of seeds, of agriculture. In so doing, we're reminded that celebration in life doesn't come from keeping your hands pristine. Instead, you experience bounty, oftentimes by getting your hands in the dirt itself. This was Josephine Fisher. She took note of what she was faced with, and she rolled up her sleeves to deal with it. Jo celebrated the bounty of her life while being able to connect with plain truths of the world as she saw it. The idea of soil, of land, feels so perfect right now. This is very much the closing of a circle, of a real return to roots. The daughter of Morris and Lillian, or it's April, Josephine was born January 30, 1925, right here in Bridgeton, and graduated Bridgeton High School at age 16, trying college later on in life. She was raised in the nearby town of Carmel, where we will later lay her to rest. The Jewish community there was strong and close-knit. Jo had two sisters, Miriam, Sis, and Marlene, and a brother, Leon. Their father headed up the largest family-owned land parcel in South Jersey and had productive fruit farms. The oldest of a large family, Jo's father, Morris, immigrated from Russia as part of an effort by Baron de Rothschild. His goal was to relocate Jews and trained them, helping to establish them in agriculture in America. Lillian, or Bub, was an intelligent woman. Together, they instilled the notion that wits and work could produce bountiful results. And Joe was always able to bring both wits and work to bear. She took lessons, learning to fly as a young woman, and used her pilot's license to fly Piper Cubs. Her mind soared similarly as she read constantly, regular in her library visits. In the 1940s, Joe was married to Dr. Herbert Fisher, a radiologist. They had 3 sons and a daughter, Marjorie. Marjorie, however, lived just a few years, dying very young with a heart condition, and it was a tragedy for Joe. She always mourned the loss of her daughter. After a brief detour to New York State for Herbert to do his time in the service after being drafted in World War II, the family returned back south. Ultimately, they ended up in Philadelphia's western suburbs with a very comfortable, prosperous life. While Herbert was successful, a heart attack and subsequent poor health led to his very untimely death. By the 1960s, Jo was a widow in her 40s, still finishing the raising of children with Fred in college. The successful financial underpinning to their lives suffered a quick reversal of fortune, and Jo lost the house, income, and resources. She had to start again from scratch. Faced with tragedy and hardship, Jo persevered. She rented an apartment in Bryn Mawr, went to work doing accounting at a law firm, and made as good a life as possible for her children. She worked tirelessly as a bookkeeper at several Center City, Philadelphia law firms. The results seemed to speak for themselves. With Robert and Fred working as attorneys and Andy, a U.S. Olympic coxswain turned investment banker, Jo's role modeling of determination, her demonstration of resilience, most certainly played a part. Her sense of culture, and especially the culture of her town, was heartfelt and strong and extended throughout her life. She loved classical music, always with tickets to the Philadelphia Orchestra. She was devoted to opera, and she was devoted to the Phillies, counting herself as a fanatic, watching every game. Her capacity to give and to love and to be devoted were appreciated by family and friends alike. She had space in this wonderful generosity of spirit for the four-footed too, loving when Fred would bring his dog Medusa for a visit. She would keep toys for Medusa to play with, even occasionally letting Medusa lick her face. She kept her hand in so many things, so much of it done with others. Setbacks. They dogged Jo, but her fighting spirit always pushed her to recover. She became very ill in the 1980s, yet beat a case of nearly life-threatening viral spinal meningitis. Knee replacements? No problem. Her will was strong. She showed a steadfast ability to keep moving in the face of adversity. Recollecting how Jo seemingly broke bone after bone and battled illness after illness, Mays gave her official assessment. Jo was tenacious. She had a strong will to survive and always pulled herself up. She put the hard work into recovering. She showed neither bitterness nor even a hint of wanting to give up. Surrender wasn't in the vocabulary. Having suffered the death of a child and later experiencing the passing of Leon and Sis, she bore the effects of much loss in her life, and she did so with dignity. Retirement for Jo did not mean stop. She had an intrepid sense of adventure, and after retirement, loved to travel with her friends, Harriet, Carol, her Aunt Minnie. She loved the travel trips she took with a Villanova professor. And how many of you have gone whitewater rafting? Well, Jo did that too, but in her 70s. For her, the road that was most interesting was the road not yet taken. She earned her moniker of Cool Aunt. She was always a pleasure to be around. As noted, she spent many weekends with Robert and Marilyn, and with Marlene and her brother-in-law Larry. She trekked all over, visiting Andy and his family in Hong Kong, California, and Minnesota. Jo spent many a Christmas with them and with Karen's family in Minnesota. She jumped right into everything, from the games to the lutefisk. She was always willing to try something new. She learned bridge, and she was good at it late in life. Her talents extended to needlepoint. How many people have at least one of her needlepoint pillows? She painted china, she crocheted baby blankets, she busied herself with knitting and crosswords, cryptograms, and word games. She kept her hands active and her mind sharp. While Augusta noted Jo's talents with the New York Times crossword, there was one voice that chimed in to say that she sometimes used to use erase the paper. She's remembered for her love of the beach. She rented for so many summers on Long Beach Island. If enduring life's bumpy road didn't predispose Jo to always acting overly cheery at times, she refused to give way to being negative or pessimistic. Into her elder years, she remained cultured, loving, giving, realistic, and brave. Jo lived in Narberth, Pennsylvania, where she worked as the resident manager before moving to Wynwood. Jo was a resident of the Quadrangle in Haverford for the past 10 years, and with each move, with each reinvention, Jo showed an amazing capacity to make new, meaningful relationships. She outlived multiple sets of friends. She was never deterred from making moves. When she moved to new places and communities, she always engaged with and became an active member of whatever community she was in. In her 90s at the Quadrangle, she was a model for never giving up. Ever the learner, learning a computer, learning Zoom was no problem. As the years advanced, she showed she could always be depended on. As we noted, she advocated for the residents. She served in so many volunteer capacities. She advocated for anyone who needed it. As Marlene colorfully put it, Jo had balls. It was no surprise that she would address any staff member at the moment of their poor treatment of someone and direct them to change instantly. She rolled with the punches and handled growing old with grace. Other folks have handled the hardships of growing old with much less positivity. We are all blessed to have borne witness to Jo's tale. When reading a novel, we almost invariably flip the pages. We try to see how many pages are left until it comes to an end. We know that stories of imagination will end. The movie runs so much time, the book so many pages. We don't know how they'll end, but we know when. That's the major difference between a true story and an invented one. In life, we cannot count the pages. We cannot check the clock. What we think of as the end of our story could come at any moment. We're not for use. Yet, is it really the end of our story? Perhaps the final story itself can help answer that question. Whenever it was needed, the great Rabbi Yisrael Baal Shem Tov would go to a certain place deep in the forest. He would light a fire and say a special prayer, and always the world at that time would be uplifted. In later times, the Baal Shem Tov's disciple, the Maggid of Mezrich, would go to the same spot in that forest. He would say, Master of the universe, listen, I don't know how to light the fire, but I know how to say the prayer. And again, the world would be uplifted. A generation later, the Maggid of Mezrich's disciple, Moshe Leib of Sassav, would go into the forest and he would say, Lord of the world, I don't know how to light the fire. And I don't know how to say the prayer. But I know this place and it must be enough. It was enough and the world would be uplifted. The years passed. And when a later disciple, Rabbi Yisrael Levrizhin, needed help from heaven, he spoke to God. I'm unable to light the fire. And I don't know the prayer. I can't even find the place in the forest. But I can tell the story. And this must be enough. And it was. While the story of the forest, the fire, and the prayer may be about many things, I like to think that it deals with the power of memory in the face of loss. You have suffered a loss, yet your memory is active. Jo had her own version of the forest, the fire, and the prayer. Her forest included the many vibrant communities she helped create and of which she was part. The fire was her determination and grit and perseverance, clearing the obstacles that might stand in her way. Her prayer was answered repeatedly as she watched the family she raised grow personally and professionally, and as she allowed them to enrich her life. All of this, however, has sadly come to an end. Life is finite, even if some may achieve the measure of many years. For Jo, the forest, the fire, and the prayer are gone, yet you, all of you, can tell the story. There's a power to the story that can transcend the bounds and limitations of place and time. The story must be enough, and it will be. We not only remember the past, but we pass on to future generations the essence of Jo's experiences. Her hopes and aspirations and dreams, we must give them the continuity that they deserve. What remains is to answer the unspoken questions of grandchildren and great-grandchildren, and to tell the story of Jo Fisher, Yaakov Freda, but Moshe Aaron Villem. These moments that we devote to her now are simply drops in an ocean of affection, but real tribute will be paid for many years through remembering and telling good stories. We thank the Lord our God with our heart, soul, and life for setting up life here on earth, so that we have had the gift of those presence and example. Our blessing to you as you begin this supreme spiritual act of turning over is this: may your story be treasured and told for generations, and may you dwell in the house of the Lord forever. I'd like to close this chapel service with the memorial prayer, the El Malei Rachamim. And if you are able, I'll ask that you rise at this time.
El Malei Rachamim, Shocher Babromim, Ametzin Kirucha Nechona, Tachat Kanfei Hashchina, B'ma'alot Kedoshim U'Tehorim, Kezohar Harakia Mazirim, Et Nishmat Yaakov Freda Bat Moshe Aaron V'Leah, Shehalcha Le'olama, B'Gan Eden Tehei Menuchata, Ana Ba'al HaRachamim, Hastileha B'Seter Knafecha Le'olamim, Utzror B'Tzror HaChaim Et Nishmata, Adonai hu nachalata, v'tanuach b'shalom al mishkava, v'nomar amen.
Exalted, compassionate God, grant infinite rest in your sheltering presence among the holy and pure to the soul of Josephine Fisher, who has gone to her eternal home. Merciful one, we ask that our loved one find perfect peace in your eternal embrace. May her soul be bound up in the bond of life. May she rest in peace. And let us say, Amen. You may be seated. On behalf, certainly of the family, I'm grateful that you were all able to be here supplying this community proper send-off. We're glad there were so many blessings, and for those who give thanks. There will be details about should we meet on Wednesday. Decided, or we'll communicate that. But at this time, I'm going to request that the pallbearers come forward.
Folks and everyone else, we would ask that you just remain at your places. And as the casket is escorted from the chapel area, if you would kindly rise as that takes place with the assistance of the pallbearers. We'll travel by procession to the cemetery where the final prayers by Rabbi will be said at the graveside. And I thank you on behalf of the family for gathering. Many of you are family, but it is a beautiful mitzvah today to provide this ceremony for your beloved mother, grandmother, and aunt, sister. Folks, I think by referring to the obituary, you will notice the dates and times and places for worship. It has been announced in the obituary.